Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome here. We are live today from Kardec Radio. We are also live at Good Harvest Fraternal Group Facebook page and also at Drop of Lights Fraternal Group here online in Facebook as well. So we've been talking about the psychology of joy. And I'm going to be facing two cameras because I have two lives going on at the same time. But anyway, so we're going to speak about joy and the psychology of it, as well as the spiritual level of feeling joyful. It's very different to be happy, and it's a whole different thing to be joyful. So on the first talk, we did it last week, we really concentrated on the difference between being joyful and being happy. Today I wanted to concentrate, and we also did a poem by May that was psychographed by Givaldo Pereira Franco. So today we're going to do a little different. We're going to be speaking for about 2 minutes, and I wanted to bring out a study, a psychological study about your immune system, how to deal with viruses and bacteria. And I wanted to bring this study because it's fascinating. I just came upon the study, the psychological study, and I think we can all take advantage from this study that I found out. Now, this was a study that was published on the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. So we're not talking about a study that was just, these researchers have been top of the top. They're very, very scientific in what they do. They're very reputable. And what I wanted to say is, I just wanted to start because I have some material that I have to read. And then I'm going to explain how this study was done and what we can take from it, because we're living in an era that we're trying to fight viruses, especially, correct? Also bacteria. But what is it about happiness and what is it about joy that can help us? Or what is it about these two that can hurt us? Now, people who are happy but have little to no sense of meaning. And when I say meaning here, their study focused on meaning, having meaning, doing something for others. So I, Deborah, substituted the word meaning for joy, because when we talked last week, joyful is having a meaningful life, to give and not to take. Happy is when you take. Give meaning or joy is when you give. So that's a very important difference to do. So it's very interesting because what they said is people who are happy but have no joy in their lives have the same gene expression patterns as people who are enduring chronic adversity. Now, we're going to go biology here today, okay? So the same gene expression patterns, the same biologically in your body, what happens is when you are happy but you have no joy, your genes will have the same response as if you're under chronic adversity. Now, I want you to read this study at some point. I can put the study here, the reference, because it's extremely important. This study to me blew my mind. So what did they say, basically? First, I wanted to just phrase out here what the difference is. And this is according to the researchers. Now, they said that researchers who looked at a large sample of people over a month long found that happiness is associated with selfish taking behavior, and that having a sense of meaning or joy in life is associated with selfless giving behavior. So again, when we talk about being happy, it's because something happened to us. I'm happy because I won the lottery. I'm happy because I found a boyfriend. I'm happy because I lost weight or I gained weight. Something external happened to me, and henceforth happiness occurred. Now, when it's joyful, it's something internal, something that I gave, something that I did. Did you ever have that feeling of having done something so fantastic or so amazing that somebody else felt the happiness? And that way you were full of joy. Now, joy, again, that's what we aim for in life, not happiness. Happiness, of course, we should, because we also should have things good things happen to us. But joy is when we give things. So we want a balance. We want to feel happy, but we also want to feel joyful. Okay? Now this study, let's go and dig in because we only talked for 15 minutes and I really want to talk about the study itself. Now, here's what the study says, okay? This is at the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. It shed light on the difference between meaning and happiness, but on a biological level. So this is on a biological level. Barbara Fredrickson. Now, Barbara Fredrickson, she was, in 2014, I think she was the 13th, considered the 13th most influential psychologist of all times. And she actually teaches at Coursera. She teaches positive psychology. I think I've taken a course with her before. So she knows her stuff, okay? And she's the one of the researchers. And also from the University of North Carolina. She's from the University of North Carolina. And then Steve Cole, a genetics and psychiatric researcher at UCLA. So these two people, okay? They did this study about joy and how it affects your immunity. Now here is what the study says. Okay, I have to read it so you understand the study. After noting the sense of meaning and happiness, meaning, let's exchange that for joy, okay, for the purpose of what we're here to say. Fredrickson and Cole, with their research colleagues, looked at a way certain genes expressed themselves in each of the participants. So some people felt happy, some people felt joyful, and they wanted to study how the genes worked, how the biology would work on people that felt happy and people that felt joyful. And like neuroscientists who use MRI scanning to determine how regions of the brain respond to different stimuli, Cole and Fredrickson were interested in how the body at a generic level respond to feelings of happiness and joy. Okay, so what they did was they figured this out. Okay, Cole's past work, it was linked through it linked various kinds of chronic adversity to a particular gene expression, and that was a pattern that this gene worked. So when people felt lonely, okay, now let's think about us, right? We're at the Corona era. So let's think about pre-Corona and post-Corona, how you felt. Because I also heard a phrase that was outstanding yesterday at one of our studies. Someone said, we were more lonely before Corona than we are now. I thought this phrase was outstanding because we weren't aware how disconnected we were. We were just in the middle of chaos, in the middle of a lot of people, but we were disconnected. And now we want to be connected. Now we're connecting more, I think, than before. Now, this is a whole different talk, and we'll talk about that as well. Anyway, when people feel lonely, when they're grieving the loss of loved ones, or when they're struggling to make ends meet, right? When they're struggling, their body goes into a threat mode. So you feel threatened, okay? So when you feel threatened, you go into a stress response. Now we're talking biological. It triggers an activation of a stress-related gene pattern that has two features. Now, so when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling like you can't make ends meet, when you feel that you're grieving, your body goes into this process, right? You start to stress, and it goes into it triggers this whole response. So this is what happens. An increase in the activity of pro-inflammatory genes and a decrease in the activities of genes involved in antiviral responses. Why is this important? Because this is what happens when we were, back in the day when we didn't have a lot of people, when we were feeling isolated, when we're feeling lonely, our bodies had to be triggered into believing that we would have to prevent ourselves from bacterial infections, right? Because that was the biggest threat. You were alone, you were far away. You needed to be protected from bacteria, right? It didn't matter the amount of people. It was mostly because you were lonely. So if you were alone and you get a cut, and so what your body would do would send these signals, and it would send this anti-inflammatory response from being lonely, from being alone, from being, and this we're talking about our ancestors. So it makes so much sense. I mean, I'm fascinated by this study. And what happens is when this threat goes on for too long, our anti-inflammatory trigger or response, right? The activity of these genes, for too long, what happens if you're always under this? It starts to not be good for you. It starts to not be healthy for you, because now it can compromise your heart. It can compromise, people can get rheumatoid arthritis. People can get lupus. People can get, again, heart problems. There's a lot of problems associated with this overactivation, right? This anti-inflammatory response. And what happens is when you are around a lot of people, then your body needs a different type of preparedness, antiviral, because people bring viruses, right? That's usually the problem, is a lot brings viruses. Now, when you're lonely, you're prepared for infections, dealing with bacteria. So the study goes on, and what I'm saying here, we have to really listen, and we have to really, after the audio stops, we have to bring it into the context, because this study, again, it's fabulous. You have a forward-looking immune system, Fredrickson says. If you have a long track record of adversity, okay, your body prepares you for bacterial infections. So this is what I was saying here. If you're always under, adversity, then you're always prepared for bacteria infections. Again, for our ancestors, this whole thing about lonely, so it was associated with bacterial infections. On the other hand, if you're doing well, and this is why it's important, because we're going to link this to spiritual, which means joy, right? And instead of happiness, which means I just want for me to be happy. So when your body's doing well and having lots of healthy social connections, your immune system shifts forward to prepare you for viruses, which you're more likely to contract if you're interacting with a lot of people. So again, this is fantastic to know, because when we're talking about healthy social connections, were we really having healthy social connections before? Because we're talking about the whole Corona era. Maybe we weren't. Maybe we were not having healthy connections. We were having tons of connections, but not healthy ones. Now it seems like we're, everything is bringing us to be more connected, but on a deeper level. Not just a lot of people around, but really being connected. So when you are truly connected, you are feeling joyful, because it's about others. It's not about you. When it's about you, it's a lot about happiness. When it's about others, it's about joyful. So let's move on, and we're getting close to the end, but this is something you guys should read. Colin Fredrickson found that people who are happy but had little or no sense of meaning in their lives, that means joy. Sense of meaning in your life is when you are doing something for others. Like Chico Xavier, right? He was full of joy. Even though he had moments that were sad moments, and we all will have it, he was full of joy. Kardec was a very joyful person, because he was working throughout his entire life, from when he was a teacher, when he was a scientist, when he was a spiritist. He was always full of joy, because he was always working towards giving others. Okay, so going back, Colin Fredrickson found that people who are happy but have little or no sense of meaning in their lives, right, have the same gene expression patterns as people who are responding to and enduring chronic adversity. So people who are happy, only happy, not joyful, their gene expression is the same as those people, right, who are fighting adversity, chronic adversity. And that means you're always in an anti-inflammatory response, which means that when your body is always preparing to be bacteria infected, and you're always on that mode, you increase your chances for autoimmune system illnesses. It increases your probability to get heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, tons of things that you can't be on that stress response the whole time. You can't be preparing for a bacterial infection all the time. So if, and here it goes on, that is, if the bodies of these happy people are preparing them for bacterial threats by activating the pro-inflammatory response. That's exactly what I said. Chronic inflammation is, of course, associated with major illnesses like heart disease and even various cancers. Now, last thing, last paragraph. Let me look at my time here. Okay, so I'm just going to do, this is too bad given the most beneficial gene pattern associated with meaningful or joyfulness. People whose level of happiness and meaning. Now, if you're happy and you're joyful, think spiritually, okay? Spiritually. People whose level of happiness and joyful line up, right? And people who have a strong sense of joy and to give to others, but they may not be necessarily happy. They showed a deactivation on the adverse stress response. So their body, we're not preparing them for the bacterial infections that we get when we're alone or in trouble, but for the viral infections that we get when surrounded by a lot of people. You see how this would have been so important if we had this study before this threat of viral infections, because joyfulness will prepare your body for fighting infections that has to do with viruses. So the last phrase I wanted to leave for you guys is Carl Jung, and he says this: the least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. And Chico Xavier would say, spread joy for every place that you pass by. So I really dug into the psychological research. I am 2 minutes over time. I do apologize because I wanted to present the entire research for us to now go back to this talk, and it's not because of Deborah, it's not because of me, it's because of the value of the research. And then go online, go on Google, and really understand this research, because it has a treasure of information here about your body's response to viruses and to bacteria, depending on if you exercise happiness or joyfulness. And if we're going to be spiritists, and if we're going to study Kardec, and if we're going to look at the lives of the most joyful people in the world, those are the people we should aim to imitate. Those are the people that we should aim to be like, right? Christians, Christ-like. So thank you for listening. Next week we'll come back with a different topic. Last week was Mei Mei's poem by Chico Xavier. Today was a psychological scientific study. And next week, who knows? I'm going to get my material and pass on to you guys with a lot of love. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again next Monday, my friends. Be safe.